מסכת בבא מציעה דף ק"ו, המקבל שדה מחברו ואכלها, חגב או נשטפה. אם מכת מדינה היא, מנקה לו מן חכורו. אם אינה מכת מדינה, אין מנקה לו מן חכורו. Someone receives a field as a tenant farmer from someone else, and it gets ruined either by grasshoppers or a wind blast. So now the tenant farmer wants to say, listen, I got nothing out of this, so you have to deduct from the amount that I pay you because the field is not producing anything. So is that a valid claim? It depends. If there's a regional disaster across a wide area, then yes, he can subtract that from the amount that he has to pay. Right? This is we'll see how wide it has to be, but it's the whole area. But if it's not a whole regional disaster, but local, just to this field or this small area, then he does not subtract from it. Only if it's a major disaster, then the tenant farmer says, well, what can I do? It's a major disaster. I'm not paying you. But if it's only that field, then he still has to pay. Rabbi Yehuda omer, im kibela hamenu b'ma'ot ben kach u'ben kach eno menakeh lo mechachoro. Rabbi Yehuda says, if he received the field and paid a sum of money, instead, usually a tenant farmer says, I'll give you this much barley, this much wheat from what grows. But if instead he pays money, well, in that case, he's a renter. And a renter, right, is like a temporary ownership. And so therefore, the renter would have to pay no matter what. Even if there was a big regional disaster, he would still have to pay whatever they had agreed to. Hechidami makat medina. So now how big does it have to be a regional disaster? Amar Rav Yehuda kegon di ishaduf ruba de baga. Rav Yehuda says has to be most of the valley where that field was destroyed. Then that's called regional. Ula amar kegon shnishtadefu arba sadot me'arba ruchoteha. Ula says no, it doesn't have to be the whole majority of the whole valley, but rather the 4 fields on the 4 directions of the field that was rented. If not only the field in the middle that was rented, but all the 4 fields around it also were affected, then that's called a regional disaster. It's actually doesn't have to be a huge area, but all the surrounding area. Amar Ola ba'u b'marava nishtaf telem echad al pnei kula mai. Now Ola says that in the west in Eretz Yisrael they had some clarification questions about this very definition. Let's say one furrow was blasted along its entire length. In other words, you have the tenant field in the middle that was destroyed, and one furrow on the north, one furrow from the next neighboring field on the east, and all 4 sides. So it's not that do you need the entire neighboring fields to be destroyed, or if just one furrow from each of those fields that is adjacent to the tenant field, is that enough? Or what if it's like the flip side, that nishtayer telem echad al pnei kula mahu? What if all 4 neighboring fields are destroyed except for the furrow that's adjacent, that's intact, right? So since you just look at the furrow that's immediately adjacent, and nothing happened, that was fine, and therefore this is not a regional, or do you look at the entire field and that one furrow does not count for anything? If sika bera mai, what if there are fallow fields surrounding the tenant field? So since they don't grow anything anyway, there's nothing to be destroyed. So should we skip over them and look at the fields that are surrounding them, and so that we just the fallow fields we ignore them, and if the area surrounding them is destroyed, then this also? Or do the fallow fields separate? And the fallow fields, well, there's no damage there, they couldn't be damaged there, then that's it. The tenant has to pay the entire amount. What do we say about that? Or aspasta. What if the neighboring fields are planted with animal fodder, which is not the same as wheat or barley? That's wheat mostly, that's used for humans, but aspasta is only for animals. So since that's that's a different kind of crop, and all that was destroyed, but maybe that's not transferable and comparable to the human crop that's on the field of the tenant farmer. Zera acher mai. What if both are human consumption, but the fields surrounding were a different species? There were beans, and those got destroyed, but the tenant was put wheat in there, and so does that count as being, oh look, see, it's all the surrounding ones were destroyed also? Or do you say, no, those were different species, and therefore they don't connect, they're not comparable? What if they're both grains, but different kinds of grains? The surrounding fields were wheat, and he planted barley. And so do you say, well, these are different things, and so this is not regional? Or do you count them all to be the same, and therefore it is regional, all according to the definition of ula? What if all the area around was destroyed by a wind blast, but his field was destroyed by mildew? Or the other way around? Do they have to be destroyed by the same type of disaster, or then it's regional? Or if it's different disasters, then we say that then you'll say that the disaster that from the surrounding fields has nothing to do, does not connect with does not prove anything about the destruction of this particular field that the tenant has, and so that's called a local disaster, and he would still have to pay. Mai teko. So these are all good questions that we leave standing. Now, if the owner said, I want you to plant wheat here, and the tenant went and he didn't follow what the owner said, and he put barley, and it got destroyed, and most of the valley also got destroyed by a wind blast, including also the barley got destroyed. So now let's see their claims. So the tenant farmer might have a claim and say, listen, it's true, I went against your word, but even if I planted wheat, which is what you wanted, it still would have gotten wind blasted, because look, the whole valley had the same problem. So even though I didn't do what you said, if I did what you said, it still would have been destroyed, and therefore I shouldn't have to pay. Or can the owner say, if you planted wheat, then maybe I would have my prayers would have been answered, as a pasuk in the Yov says, you decree a matter, it will be established for you, and the light shall shine upon your ways. Maybe if I prayed, I was praying for wheat the whole time, and so if you planted wheat, then Hashem would have shone His light upon me, and it would have been saved. But you did something completely different, and therefore you have to pay. So that's the two sides. The Gemara concludes that, in fact, the owner's claim is stronger. If you planted wheat, then maybe my prayers could have gotten answered, and the wheat would have been saved. You changed it to barley, so therefore this is therefore you have to pay. What if this owner has many fields that he gives out to different tenant farmers, and all of the owner's fields were destroyed by wind blast, even though most things in the valley were not destroyed? So it's not regional in terms of the valley. So if we go by the regular definition, so since most of the pieces of land in the valley were not destroyed, so then the tenant farmer has to pay. The owner does not have to subtract. That's one way to look at it. Or can the tenant say, look, every single one of your fields, they're all different places here, and every single one of your fields got destroyed, even though the other fields surrounding it didn't get destroyed. Therefore, it must be your bad luck, owner. That's why all this happened, and it's not my fault, the tenant says. and so therefore I should not have to pay you. So which way do we see it? And Gemara says that the tenant does not have a correct claim, because the owner can say, if it was in fact because of my bad luck, I sinned and this is punishment, then at least some of my fields would have survived, would have been left. As Pasuk in Yirmiyah says, even Yirmiyah is talking about destruction of suffering of those who deserve it. Even for them, however, Yirmiyah says, we are left but a few from many. In other words, even when there's destruction, Hashem doesn't wipe out the nation totally, but leaves a remnant, and therefore the owner can say, if this was because of my bad luck or my sin, then I wouldn't have been totally destroyed. Therefore, it's not because of my bad luck, but rather just this happened, and happened to be that it was most of the, it was all of my fields, but it's not the majority of the fields in the valley, and therefore a tenant farmer has to pay. Now the other way around, the tenant farmer that rents from many different owners. He has a few different holdings that he is working on. And all of this tenant farmer's farms that he's working on get destroyed. And most of the valley was in fact also destroyed, and his together with them. Do we say, listen, most of the valley is destroyed, so according to that definition, the tenant farmer does not have to pay. Or do we say, since every single one of the tenant farmer's fields got destroyed, the owner can say, oh, this is because of your bad luck. Look, every single one of yours, right, was destroyed. And the Gemara concludes, yes, it makes sense that the owner has a good claim, and he can say it's because of your bad fortune. And now we ask about that. What about what we just said for the other case? Amai, hachaname, ne'male imishum lataydidihu hava mishayer li purta dava makayem bi ki nish'arnu me'at meharbe. Why can't the tenant say, as the owner did in the previous case, if it was because of my bad luck, then all my fields wouldn't have been totally destroyed. Hashem has mercy, and I would have had this pasuk fulfilled in me that there's a few left over from many. And see, since I'm totally destroyed, that means actually it's not because of my bad luck. Mishum damar le'i hava chazit li'ishtayure lach midi hava mishtayer lach midinafshach. No, so the tenant cannot say that, because the owner will say back to him, if you were worthy of having something left for you, then it would have been left from your own private land, right? That's more valuable to you. So, right, with your saving grace would have been from your own land, not from land that you had are renting out from others. And so, therefore, the fact that all of the land that you are a tenant for got destroyed, it makes more sense that it's because of your bad luck, and whatever remnant you would have would be from your personal land. Now we have a challenge to the ruling that we just saw, that if there's a regional disaster, then the tenant farmer does not have to pay. Look at this Mishnah from Masechet Arachin. Hayta shenat shitafon v'yirakon o shevi'it o shehayu shanim kishne Eliyahu eno ole lo min haminyan. We're talking here about an ancestral field that someone sells, the owner sells. He has a right to buy it back, to redeem it back. However, he has to have a waiting time of 2 years. The buyer that buys it has a right to use it for years, and the minimum plural of years is 2. And that means years of crops, as the pasuk says. And so therefore, let's say the ancestral owner sells it, and then there is a year of wind blast or mildew, or it's a Shivi'it year, and when you cannot plant anything, or there was a time of famine like the time of Eliyahu Navi when no rain fell and nothing grew. those years do not count towards that minimum of 2 years before the buyer can purchase it. The seller, the original owner, can purchase it because the one who buys it has a right to 2 crop years. So let's analyze this Mishnah. Ketani shidafon v'yerakon dumya deshanim kishne Eliyahu. Mashne Eliyahu de la have tebu'a kelal, afachaname de la have tebu'a kelal. Avaldika tebu'a salkale v'la kamdinan makat medinahi. Notice how in this Mishnah it compares wind blast and mildew to the years of Eliyahu. Just like those years of famine during the time of Eliyahu, nothing grew at all, nowhere. The whole land of Israel was barren. So too, we're talking about a case where there is nothing is growing at all, nowhere. But if there is something growing somewhere, then that counts towards the 2 years. And we don't say that this is a regional disaster. What we see over here is that in order to be a regional disaster, for the purposes of counting years before the original owner can buy it back, it has to be that there's nothing growing anywhere. But if there's something growing, then it counts. If we apply that back to our case, then it should be as long as there's something growing somewhere around here, then the tenant farmer should have to pay. It's not called a regional disaster unless nothing is growing anywhere. And that's different from the definition that we said above, that it's just the either the immediately surrounding fields or most of the valley, but if the most of the valley is not growing, then that's called a regional disaster, and the tenant farmer doesn't have to pay. According to this, he should still have to pay unless nothing is growing anywhere nearby. Amar Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, Shane hatam damar kera b'mispar shene tevuot yimkod lach shanim sheyesh behen tevuot ba'olam. Rav bar Yitzchak says no. That case of the ancestral land is different because the pasuk specifically says, according to the years of crop, he will sell it to you. So that means it has to be years that there is some crop in the world. So that's a different definition for that law. That as long as there's something growing somewhere in the world, then it's not called a regional famine. That means that that those years count. Only if it's like the time of Eliyahu, then the years don't count. But that's a special definition for that law. That does not apply to our law of the tenant farmer. For the tenant farmer, it's sufficient that in this area there's nothing growing, then he doesn't have to pay. Amar le Rav Asher Rav Kahana, ele me'ata shivita le'lo min haminyan da'ika tebu'a bechosel ha'aretz. So Rav Asher asked Rav Kahana, according to this definition, then a Shavi'it year should count towards that 2 years that the seller has to have it, because there is something growing. And outside the land of Israel, Shavi'it does not apply, and they can plant there and grow things there. So this is not a total stoppage of anything growing. It is a crop year. There's something growing outside the land of Israel. So why did the Mishnah say that Shavi'it does not count? Amale Shavi'it afka'ata de malkahi. And Rav Kahana answered, no, Shavi'it is different because it's a decree of the king that you cannot grow anything. King meaning Hashem said so, and so therefore that does not count as a year of crop. If Hashem himself said no crops this year, then we're not looking outside the land of Israel where something can grow. So that is considered a year, is not considered a crop year, and that's why it doesn't count. Amar le mor zutra beret Rav Mari le Ravina elemata shivit lo tale lo min hagerua alamatena noten selo pinjon lashana. Okay, now that you said that a Shavi'it year is not counted as a crop year because Hashem said you can't use it, then Shavi'it should also not count for a deduction. We're talking about here if someone has an ancestral land and he donates, he makes it ekdesh, donates it to the Bet HaMikdash. The halacha of arachin is that he can redeem it back, and the amount that he has to pay when he redeems it back is not according to the market value. There's a fixed fee that he has to pay when he buys it back. He has to give a sela and a punjon for each year. It's 50 sela altogether, but if he does it, let's say halfway in, then it'll be 25 sela plus a punjon, a small coin worth 16 perutot for each year. Now, if a Shavuot year there's no crop at all, then the Shavuot year should not be counted within that. But so why do we say one selah per each of the 50 years from one yovel to another, and that includes the Shavuot? Amar le shaneatam dechazia lemishtecha ba pere. And the Ravina answered, there it's different because it's true, even though during the Shavuot year you're not allowed to plant and grow things on the land, but you can use the land. For example, you can put out produce out in the field so that the sun will dry it. That's permitted, so you still can use the land for something, and therefore the Shavuot years are also counted in the number of years that you have to redeem it for. If you donated the land, then you have to give one selah per year until the Yovel in order to redeem it, including Shavuot years, because it is somewhat useful. Amar Shemuel lo shanu ela shezera'a v'samcha v'achala chagav, aval lo zera'a kelal lo. Shemuel says that this halacha that says when there's a regional disaster, then the tenant farmer does not have to pay. That is only true if the tenant farmer did his part and he planted and it sprouted, and then grasshoppers came and destroyed everything. Then he'd say, oh, listen, I did my part, I tried, but what can I do? It got destroyed. However, if the tenant farmer did not even plant anything, then he is responsible to pay the owner the fixed amount that they agreed to. Because the owner has a good claim. He can say, if you had planted things, then the pasuk would have been fulfilled in me. They will not be shamed in time of evil and days of famine. They shall be satisfied. In other words, Hashem might have had mercy on me and saved me from these grasshoppers, but you have to try. And if you didn't even try, there's no way then that I could be saved. Mativ Rav Sheshat ro'eh shaya ro'eh v'niach edro u'ba la'ir u'ba ze v'taraf u'ba ri v'daras en omrim lo ilo haya sham haya masil ela omdim oto im yachol lasil hayav ve'im lav patur ve'amai nemale ihavet hatam hava mekayem bi gam etari gam hado bika abdecha. Also another challenge by Rav Sheshat from a baraita that talks about a shepherd that he was herding animals for someone else for hire, and he left the animals out of the wall of the town, and he went to town for a while to go shopping, and in the meantime a wolf came and tore some of the animals to pieces, or a lion came and trampled on them. Now, we don't say, listen, if you had been there you could have saved them and therefore you're responsible. No, it's not necessarily true that he could have saved them. Rather, we have to make an estimation. We look at this guy, and we look at the size of the wolves and the lions and how many there were, and so we see if were he there, he could have saved the sheep, then he's liable to pay. But if there was too many and this guy's too weak and there's no way he would have been able to save them anyway, then he is patur. Now we say, why? Why doesn't the owner of the sheep have a claim? And he can say, if you were there, then a miracle would have happened for me. Right? As it says in Shemuel, right? Your servant smote both the lion and the bear. David says that to Shaul. So you see, it is possible, right? With a little divine providence, someone can kill the lion and the bear. So maybe the owner can say, listen, even though there was a whole bunch of lions and wolves there, and you're not so strong, but who knows? Maybe a miracle would have happened for you, but you had to be there. So this is a challenge to Shemuel's ruling right above that you have to plant something at least, and then if the grasshoppers take it, okay, what can you do? But if you don't plant it at all, then the tenant farmer has to pay, because the owner can say, well, maybe a miracle would have happened to me, and if at least if you planted it, then I could have been saved, right, based on this pasuk. And yet here we don't say that. We say if there's no way he could have saved it because he's too weak, then he's patur. Why? Why don't we say maybe a miracle would have happened for the owner of the sheep? And the answer is Mishum Damar Le Iavit Hazit La'it Rachushe Lachnisa Havait Rechesh Lachnisa Kedrebi Chanina Bendosa Dematyan Ize Dube Bekarnaihu. The tenant has a claim back, and he says, if you, the owner, were worthy of a miracle happening to you, then a great miracle could have happened to you, just like happened to Rabbi Chanina ben Dosa, great chassid and sage. His goats brought bears impaled on their horns. Right? Nobody was there, no shepherd was there, and these goats were attacked by bears, and the goats were able to just miraculously, without any human help, kill those bears and bring them back on their horns. And so the tenant can say, listen, if you're worthy of a miracle, then a miracle would happen, and your sheep would be saved, whether I was there or not. But it doesn't matter if I'm there or not. A miracle didn't happen to you, and if I was there, I couldn't have saved them with my human strength, and therefore I don't have to pay. However, the owner can have a counterclaim and says, listen, maybe I'm not worthy of a big miracle happening, a great big open miracle of these sheep somehow defending themselves and keeping away and killing the lions that are attacking them. Maybe I'm not worthy for that, but I might have been worthy for a smaller miracle that if you, shepherd, were there, that you could have fended them off. That's not the craziest miracle, so you should have been there, and I could have, a small miracle could have happened for me, and I would have been saved. And so we leave this with a difficulty because it's hard to reconcile this halacha with the halacha of Shemuel just before. We now see a machloket between two baraitot about how many times does a tenant farmer have to keep planting even though it gets destroyed every time. One baraita says that tenant farmer has to plant once and twice, and if both of those times it gets destroyed, that's it. This is a chazakah. It's going to keep getting destroyed, and he does not have to tend to the field again, and then he doesn't have to pay after that. But there's another baraita that says he has to try 3 times, and if all 3 times it gets destroyed, then he doesn't have to try anymore, and he can deduct from the amount that he pays to the owner. So there seems to be a contradiction between these baraitot. Is it 2 times or 3 times? Lakashya ha-Rabbi ha-Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel. These are different authors. One is Rabbi and one is Rashbag. Ha-Rabbi damar bitre zimneh vechazaka ha-Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel damar bitlat zimneh vechazaka. Rabbi Yehuda Nasi says 2 times makes a pattern, and then that's it, a presumptive status. Once it happens twice, it's probably going to happen again, and therefore he doesn't have to try again. Rashbag, however, says that only 3 makes a presumptive status of a pattern. Amer Resh Lakish, lo shanu ela shezerah v'samcha v'chala chagab, aval zerah ve'lo samcha, maseh amar le ba'al hakarka, kol yemei zarah la ve'azil. V'ademat amar papa adatu arise midabra v'kayema kima areshayhu. Resh Lakish says that those baraitot, whether it's 2 or 3 times, is only when he planted it and it started growing, and then grasshoppers came and destroyed it. Then, after 2 or 3 times, he doesn't have to try again. But if he planted and nothing grew, then he has to keep trying, because the owner can say, well, maybe you just planted at the wrong time, maybe it's too early in the season, and you have to keep on trying because nothing happened. In other words, you can't make a chazakah out of nothing happening. Only if something happens, a destruction happens once, twice, okay, there's a chazakah of destruction. But if it never even grew, there's no chazakah. You have to keep trying until you're successful. Well, that's the next question. Until when? In other words, how late in the season does he have to keep planting and trying? Maybe he planted too early and those seeds got destroyed, and then you have to try again. Okay, how long? The entire year? So the Papa says it's until the sharecroppers come from the field, right? They come when it's getting dark, and if they look up, they would see the constellation of Pleiades. This is what it looks like, right? So throughout the year, the stars keep moving in relation to us, and in each different month, you can see a different constellation in the stars. This is the system of the zodiac. Here, it's not being used for astrology, but rather for astronomy. This is a scientific usage of the stars to figure out what month it is during the year. And so he says it's until this time, which corresponds approximately to the month of Shevat. So you have to start planting all the way from the beginning of the season and all the way until Shevat. Once Shevat passes and it still didn't grow, then the tenant farmer could say, that's it. There's no hope after this. Okay, so that's what Resh Lakish says. But we have a challenge from a Baraita that gives a calendar of the year, and it gives 2-month periods of different seasons and what you do in the field during each of those seasons. And we're going to see none of the opinions here are as late as Shevat. So here we go. Meti be'Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel mishum Rabbi Meir omer. V'chen haya Rabbi Shimon ben Mesia omer kidvarav. So we have a lot of opinions here. Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Shimon ben Mesia, they agree. Chasi Tishrei machashvan v'chasi Kislev zera. Half of Tishrei, the entire month of Cheshvan, and half of Kislev, that's a time for planting. So you see here already that's it. Kislev, that's when you have to plant. Once Kislev ends, then that's it. That's the end of planting time. Nothing that you plant after is going to be successful. Chasi Kislev Tebet v'chasi Shevat Chodef, because after that is already winter time. There are some things like wheat. You have to plant that early and has to go through the winter. That's how it will grow. So that's already winter time. Chasi Shevat Adar v'chasi Nisan Kor, half of Shevat, all of Adar, half of Nisan is cold period. Chasi Nisan Iyar v'chasi Sivan Kasir. These half of Nisan, all of Iyar, and half of Sivan is a time for harvesting. Chasi Sivan Tammuz v'chasi Av Kaitz. Half of Sivan, all of Tammuz, and half of Av is summer. Chasi Av Elul v'chasi Tishrei Chom. Half of Av, all of Elul, and half of Tishrei is hot. And that's it. That's the calendar of the year, split by 2-month periods, 6 of them. Now, that is one opinion. Rabbi Yehuda moneh mitishrei. Rabban Shimon moneh me mar Cheshvan. The opinion we just saw is that of Rabbi Yehuda, and he starts counting from Tishrei. Rabbi Shimon pushes everything a month forward because he starts counting from Cheshvan. So therefore, according to him, the planting season will actually be Cheshvan into Kislev. But no one, and half of Tevet, but no one goes into Shevat, right? So man mekel bekulahu, who is the most lenient, in other words, goes the furthest along the year that you could still plant. Rabbi Shimon, bekulah, hai la kama, Rabbi Shimon goes the farthest out, and even he doesn't say all the way till Shevat. So this is a challenge against Resh Lakish, who says that the tenant farmer has to keep planting all the way until Shevat. La kasha ha de kibela mineh bechorfeh, ha de kibela mineh be'alfeh. And we say, no, there's no contradiction. The Baraita is talking about when the tenant farmer took it to plant early crops like wheat that have to be done early. So that's what the Baraita was talking about in this calendar. Whereas Resh Lakish was talking about other things like barley and beans. Those are planted late in the season. And so those late ones, well, late in the season means until Shevat. But once Shevat passes, then that's it. He doesn't have to try anymore because there's no way that those will grow. Next, we return to our Mishnah, where we saw the minority opinion of Rabbi Yehuda Omer im kibela mimenu be'ma'ot. If someone rents a field as a tenant farmer, but instead of paying with produce, he's going to pay with cash, then he's considered a renter. He temporarily owns it, and therefore, even if there's a regional calamity, he still has to pay. Now, we have a story about that. How gavra de kabil al mizre'a behu tumeh agudad har malka saba bezuzeh. Someone took a field in order to plant garlic in it, and it was on the bank of the river of Malka Seva. Here's a little map, and that's the Malka River over here. And and he paid with cash. Istakad nehar Malka Seva, and the river was dammed up upstream. People diverted the water, and then it didn't get to this area. Atalakamed Rava Amar le nehar Malka Seva la abid demiskar makat medinahi zil nechile. And so the case came to Rava because the tenant didn't want to pay, and Rava said this is unusual for the Malka River to be dammed up. It's not something that you could have expected, and therefore this is considered a regional disaster, and you can subtract from the payment to the owner. Amru le Rabbanan Rava ha'anan tenan Rabbi Yehuda omer im kibel amenu b'ma'ot ben kach u'ben kach eno menakeh lo min chachoro. But then the other sages told Rava, wait a second, your ruling goes against the Mishnah, where Rabbi Yehuda rules, if you're paying cash, that's it, you're a renter, and therefore no matter what, whether it's a regional disaster or a local disaster, he cannot deduct, he has to pay the full amount. Amar lehu let dechashla de Rabbi Yehuda. Rava said, Rabbi Yehuda has a minority opinion, and we don't have to be concerned about his opinion for halacha lema'aseh. Next Mishnah, המקבל שדה מחברו בעשרה קור חיטים לשנה ולקטה, נותן לו מתוכה. היו חיטי היפות, לא יאמר לו הריני לוקח מן השוק, אלא נותן לו מתוכה. Someone receives a field as a tenant farmer, and he says, I'm going to pay you 10 cord of wheat for the year. And he grows wheat, but there's a blight, and the wheat is bad quality. Nevertheless, there is wheat there, so he can pay the 10 cord of wheat. That's all he promised, is this amount, volume, size of wheat. And so even though it's bad quality, that's what grew. So he can fulfill his obligation by paying him that very wheat. The opposite case, if the field produces wheat that is exceptionally good, better than expected, the tenant farmer cannot say, hey, listen, this wheat is very high quality. I didn't promise that to you, so I'm going to go buy regular wheat from the marketplace and give that to you, and I want to keep this very good wheat for myself. He can't do that either. Rather, he has to pay from whatever grows on the field. So for the better or for the worse, the tenant farmer can and has to pay from the wheat that grows in the field, whether it is bad quality or very good quality. Hahu gabra. Now a couple of stories. You have a tenant farmer that they agreed he's going to grow hay, animal feed on it, and that grows very quickly. And he's going to pay not with aspasta, but rather with a few cord of barley. He's going to get the barley from somewhere. He wants to pay in barley. Okay, abda aspasta v'charsha uzra'a sa'areh v'laku hane sa'areh. So he planted aspasta. That grows very fast. And then he was able to still plow it and plant barley. Remember, we said barley, one plants late in the season, so he was able to do both of them. And the barley grew, but it was blighted and bad quality. And so now the question is, can he pay his obligation with that bad barley? After all, this is similar to our Mishnah, where they agreed you're going to grow wheat, and the wheat that grew was blighted. He can pay from that wheat because that's what the land produced. And so that's the question that Rav Chaviva from Sura of Frat asked to Ravina. He says, what do you think about this? Is this the same as our Mishnah? And therefore, yes, he can pay the barley, that's the bad barley, for his tenancy, or not? And he answered, Amar le mida mehatam la'avdad ashlichuta demara, hacha avdad ashlichuta demara. And Ravina says, no, these cases are completely different. In the Mishnah, the land did not fulfill what the owner wanted it to do, right? They agreed, and the owner said, okay, you're going to plant wheat and now it produced bad wheat. Well, that's the land it didn't do its job, and so therefore the tenant can fulfill his financial obligation by paying that bad wheat. However, in this case, the agreement was he's going to grow aspasta. And it did. It grew a very nice aspasta, and so the agreement is valid. The tenant has no complaint against the owner, right? You're going to use this for aspasta. There you go, used it for aspasta. The tenant went then, and for extra credit, he went and planted barley. But he promised barley, not from this land. He just promised barley from wherever he's going to get it, and therefore he has to give regular quality barley, and he cannot pay with this bad quality barley. Another similar case. Hahu gavra de kibel pardes mechavre be'asar dane chamra. Takif hahu chamra. Someone took a field as a tenant farmer, a pardes, an orchard, and he says, I'm going to pay with 10 barrels of wine. And this orchard grows grapes. So he grew grapes and he made wine, but the wine went sour. So Rav Kana said, I think that the tenant should be able to pay with those bad barrels of wine. They'll use them as vinegar, because that's the same thing as our Mishnah, where the wheat went bad and you pay with the wheat, and this now came from the field, so so he shouldn't have to pay out of pocket for with good wine. And Rav Ashi says a similar answer that Ravina said. The two cases are different. In our Mishnah, the field did not fulfill what the owner agreed that it would fulfill, because he said, okay, you're going to use this for wheat, and then it grew bad wheat, so the owner has to accept the bad wheat. However, in this case, the orchard produced fine grapes. There was nothing wrong with the grapes. And so he said, here, you're going to grow grapes with this? Fine, good. And now the problem was at the next step, when he turned it into wine and the wine went bad. That's not the owner of the field's problem. The owner of the field, his field can do is produce the best grapes, and the grapes were very nice. And it's the tenant that made the wine that went bad, and therefore he has to go and get proper wine and pay him with good wine. However, even Rav Ashi, who did make this distinction, will agree that if the vineyard grew grapes that shrunk, so then the field did not do what it was supposed to do. Or if it had sheaves and they were blighted, and that's what he was growing it for, then the field itself did not do what they had agreed upon, and therefore, in those cases, Rav Ashi would agree that the tenant only has to pay from the damaged crops. Baruch Adonai Le'olam, Amen ve'amen.